I never thought I'd be the kind of person to post something like this, but honestly, I've been sitting on it for months and it still eats at me every day. Maybe getting it off my chest will help. So I've been working at this mid-sized firm for about 14 years. I started back when we were barely scraping by, and there were only 20 or so employees crammed into a dingy office space with water stains on the ceiling tiles. I remember pulling 70-hour weeks just to land one account, staying late to fix mistakes on contracts that weren't even mine, and running out for coffee for everyone just to keep the wheels turning. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt like something we were all building together. Back then our founder was still around and she actually cared. She'd show up to your desk at 9 p.m. with takeout because she knew you hadn't eaten. Things changed when we brought in Jared, our new VP. On paper, he was supposed to take us to the next level. He had a shiny resume with big-name companies plastered all over it, but if you dug deeper, you'd notice he never lasted more than 2 years anywhere. He was slick, perfect hair, tailored suits, big fake smile, the kind of guy who talked over you but made it sound like he was doing you a favor. At first, I tried to give him a chance. I was one of the longest tenured employees, and I didn't want to come off as resistant to change. But almost immediately, the guy started rearranging everything. People who had been loyal for a decade got shuffled into meaningless roles. He scrapped entire departments because he thought they didn't align with the new vision. And he constantly took credit for things he didn't even touch. What got me, though, was the way he dismissed the rest of us. I'd be in meetings presenting work my team had spent weeks on, and he'd literally interrupt mid-sentence and redirect the conversation like I wasn't even in the room. I'll never forget one time, in front of 30 people at the all-hands, he called out a minor formatting mistake on a report my analyst had done. Instead of addressing it privately, he used it as an example of sloppy work, and then looked directly at me, saying, "This is what happens when leadership doesn't keep their team in check." 14 years of loyalty, and that's what I got, a public slap in the face. I wanted to walk out then and there, but I've got a mortgage, kids, and a life built on the stability of this job. So I swallowed it, at least at first. Then one day I was reviewing a stack of vendor contracts. It's part of my job to make sure all the clauses line up, especially with service providers. Buried in one of them was a new amendment I hadn't seen before. It basically said if our company renewed with them, the facilitating officer would be entitled to a retention incentive equal to 2% of the contract value. Now, this was a 5-year deal worth around $250 million. Do the math. That retention incentive came out to about $5 million. And wouldn't you know it, the facilitating officer listed was Jared. At first, I thought maybe I was misreading it. But no, it was clear as day. Jared had slipped in a clause that essentially funneled a $5 million bonus to himself the moment we signed. It wasn't even tied to performance. Just his signature. I felt like I'd swallowed a brick. This man was gutting the company, humiliating employees, and now he was straight up stealing. I sat at my desk for hours staring at the clause. I knew if I said nothing, he'd walk away rich while the rest of us got scraps. If I said something, I risked my job, maybe even legal trouble if I couldn't back it up. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the all-hands moment in my head, his smug little grin when he belittled me. I thought about the layoffs he pushed through last quarter, people I'd sat next to for years, suddenly gone. And I thought about what $5 million could do for an entire department versus what it would do for one greedy exec. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I compiled every document, every contract draft, every email chain that showed the evolution of a clause. Then I cross-referenced it with our internal approval process. Turns out, Jared had bypassed standard legal review by labeling the amendment as non-substantive, which is laughable considering it was $5 million. I packaged everything into a neat report and sent it directly to the CEO and the board's audit committee. For about a week, I heard nothing. Jared was strutting around like usual, barking orders, probably thinking his little scheme was invisible. Then, suddenly, he disappeared. No explanation, no farewell email, just gone. Word trickled down later that he'd been terminated effective immediately. Nobody said why, but I knew. I had the receipts. What shocked me most was the silence. The CEO never mentioned it. HR acted like Jared had never existed. But people knew something had gone down. You could feel the shift in the air. The smug tension that had hung over us for months evaporated. People actually started smiling again. And me? I didn't get a medal. I didn't get a promotion. Hell, I didn't even get a thank you. But I got something better. I got to watch the guy who spent months trying to crush me get taken down by his own greed, with one little contract clause as the nail in his coffin. I'm not gonna lie, though. Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing. What if he tries to retaliate someday? What if I put a target on my back? But then I think about the $5 million he tried to pocket, and I know I couldn't have lived with myself if I'd stayed quiet. So here I am, months later, still showing up to the same office, still doing the same work, but with a little more backbone than before. I learned that loyalty doesn't mean staying silent when something's wrong. It means protecting the place you helped build, even if no one ever knows what you did. And maybe that's enough.